Welcome to the Voice of Retail Special Retail Marketing Edition. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, and this special edition podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Recorded live in Toronto, April 18th, 2019 at Retail Council of Canada's annual Retail Marketing Conference, this special edition podcast features two of my onstage interviews plus insights from attendees. First, I chat with two of Canada's top influencers, Cavaliere and Shannae Ingleton. We discuss their tradecraft, experiences working with brands, and advice for retailers on how to work with key influencers to achieve their objectives. Next, my fireside conversation with Trinh Tham, Vice President of Brand Strategy and Planning at Sobeys. We talk about the tradecraft of modern retail marketer. We'll wrap up with thoughts around the key moments and insights from Canada's leading retail marketing conference, but let's get started. First of all, with a shout out to Lisa Owen, co-founder and CEO of Rent Frock Repeat, who did a great presentation on the pivot in their award-winning business.
Michael LeBlanc is going to facilitate. Michael LeBlanc is an RCC advisor, and he's going to facilitate a discussion with two amazing influencers, Jonathan Cavaliere and Shannae Ingleton. Influencer marketing is a key lever for retailers to reach their target audience and to leverage their brand. So welcome to the stage, Michael, Jonathan, and Shannae.
First of all, a special personal thanks to Lisa. What a great presentation. We tasked Lisa with the opportunity to prepare both to do a founder-to-founder interview with Joanna from NYX, and then pivot to do a full presentation. So she had to do both. So a hand for Lisa. Did a fantastic job. Now to the point at hand. So we wanted to disrupt the format a little bit. On this stage, we typically would have retailers talking, and you've heard many great discussions today. But in this format, we thought we'd disrupt a little bit and actually bring together two of Canada's top influencers and talk about the tradecraft of influencing. We know that influencing marketing is an important component of the retail marketing mix now more than ever. I was telling Jonathan, he complimented me, which is a big compliment, on my shirt. And I have to tell the story that I saw Larry Rosen post on his Instagram. I follow many of you on Instagram. And he posted this shirt. And he said, I love guitars, and I had this shirt made up. I went out and bought it. So there you go. Influencing works, right? There's the proof right in the action. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. Shannae, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to do what you do today.
So I'm an influencer, and I post about, lifestyle and motherhood from a fashionable perspective. And I essentially just started a blog when I was on mat leave a few years ago. And my background was in media, so when brands started reaching out to me, I sort of knew what to do. And I guess the rest is history.
So tell us a little bit about what the people you work with. I saw Best Buy, I saw Pampers, I saw big brands that reach out to you. So what do you really focus on? Obviously fashion, very fashionable, obviously.
So I work on lifestyle brands, but my common thread is fashion. I try to just remain authentic. I'm a fashionable person, and the people that follow me, they follow me because of my fashion sense, et cetera, and my unique perspective. But it's just really important for me to, one, work with brands that I already use or would use, and I'm telling it from my true and authentic voice.
Interesting. Jonathan, you and I met each other when we were in Ireland together, and I was impressed by your focus and your career path. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I guess I got into influencing in a somewhat unorthodox way. I was studying fashion in 2011, and I needed an internship. So I decided that I was going to create my own. 2011, there's no men's fashion internships in Canada. So I tell my internship teacher I'm working for a site called Mr. Cavaliere. I pass, it works out.
You didn't figure out it was your last name?
No, I don't know how they got by her. If she's here, I'm sorry. But so did that, and I was pretty consistent on it. So on my internship days, I would actually work on the blog, and I did that for I guess the remaining part of the year. And then in 2012, I won Canada's Sharpest Man, and I was doing personal shopping and image consulting kind of throughout. So fashion was definitely the career path I wanted to go for, and the site was just the outlet that I could talk about it from. So
now, you mentioned Canada's Sharpest Man. That was your intersection with retail, right? Because I believe that was co-sponsored with Hudson's Bay at the time,
yes, it was,
and Sharp Magazine for Men, right? So that kind of launched you into what you do today. So tell us a little bit about the brands you work with and your space. Obviously fashionable and fashion, but what are some of the other relationships you have?
Yeah, so it definitely started with the majority fashion brands, fashion and grooming. And then I guess as the industry adapted and Instagram became a profitable thing at the end of the day, I started working with people outside of fashion, outside of grooming. So it became, I worked with McDonald's, for example, and I did something with Gillette, all kind of different wine companies and liqueurs and cocktails. So it was all the products that surrounded fashion and surrounded the lifestyle that I was portraying on Instagram. So I thought that was really cool. And then at the end of the day, I think that's, I think that's kind of the best route about going about operating. So I don't want to jump ahead, but
it's a unique journey because you started as you said, gaming a little bit of the system. Congratulations, that worked out well for you. And then from the blog to the Instagram, you've been part of the social media growth right from the beginning. So congratulations for that because you positioned yourself really well. Shannae, let's talk about the tradecraft. I mean, we're here to talk about some of the tradecraft of how you approach what you do on a daily basis. So, we wanted to dispel any myths that this is kind of a random thing that you just pop into your head on any given day and decide you're going to post something. You've already talked about how you really like to work with companies that match to you, be very authentic. So tell us a little bit about your tradecraft. What's an average day? How do you work? Tell us a bit more about your life.
So my days are dynamic, and I guess my background is in publishing and media, so I try to make sure that my content has sort of like a 50-50 advertising to editorial ratio. So I'll spend time sort of working on an editorial calendar, things that are just like passion projects, things that are truly reflective of myself and my lifestyle. And then the other half of my time is fielding opportunities, saying yes to the ones that make a fit or that are a fit, and saying no to the ones that aren't. And then once I've said yes to an opportunity, so for example, American Express, I brainstorm ways that I can demonstrate through social content how I truly and authentically use Amex every day. So that would be, brunch with my friends, or, a recent trip to New York where I can take advantage of some of the benefits and things like that as being an Amex card holder. So things like that. So I brainstorm how to truly and authentically share the brand through my content, and work with brands on negotiating rates and things like exclusivity and content ownership, that sort of thing.
I want to get back to that rate discussion in a minute, but Jonathan, when we were together, you were telling me, and I was sitting with you watching these emails and posts pour in with questions about, from the people who follow you, just advice.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a big part of your day as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll get questions from guys asking about everything under the sun, right? So everything from how do I wear a blue shirt to is this cool to I'm going on, it's my anniversary, what do I wear and where do I go? So it's a little bit of everything. I would say direct message on Instagram is majority of where that comes from. It used to be on email. So it used to be long form. It used to be like, all right, I'm starting this job, I'm doing this, and I want to look this way, right? So it used to be a little bit more labor intensive, but now it's typically guys are asking through DM and they're saying, hey, I want to do this, I do this.
Right.
How do I wear this?
So your content, people are reaching out to you for advice, and that helps form your part of your brand as an influencer, which you leverage, and it's just part of what you do, not just, hey, people are asking me, what do you want me to recommend?
Yeah.
But you're just, you yourself have that authenticity that you provide advice to people.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of people, especially brands, they I guess they judge the engagement based on the numbers. And I would say when it comes to direct messages, I think that's a whole different game. I think that's if the value for a like is 1, I think the value for a direct message is probably 10, because you've made a connection with someone and you've chatted with them, and you've in a small way you've changed their lives. So I think that's pretty cool.
Shannae, you mentioned negotiating, so I want to talk about the difference between quantity and quality. So there's one measure of your respective value, and that's how many people follow you or how many people message. But we really know that that's kind of a hollow measurement. It's really the quality. So how do you think about that, and how do you represent that out to retailers and your clients?
So definitely quality over quantity. I think that when looking for influencers, it's important to forget about the number initially if you can, and look for people who are just like a true and complete fit with your brand. So if you're looking for somebody who's living a specific lifestyle, so use hashtags and even Google searches to find people that might fit into that category. And then once you've sort of found a subset of those people, look who's creating like really compelling quality content, who's truly storytelling, who's connecting with their audience, who's responding to comments. So you guys aren't able to see the DMs, but the direct messages. But who's responding to their community, who's actively engaged and really making an impact. And then from there, you can sort of like do a little bit more of a deeper dive. Like there's tools you can use to determine what their engagement percentages are, things like that. And doing a visual search to sort of eliminate red flags like bots and fake followers or engagement that's sort of like shifty. But does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, we really have a room full of retail marketers. So, our purpose here today is, okay, from the practitioners, from two of the best in the country, how do you like to work with brands? So, Jonathan, let's talk about that for a bit. So, I guess, very broadly speaking, there's two ways to work with brands. They can approach you and say, I want you to do this, very prescriptive. I want you to post this. I want you to wear this. The other approach is, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then you work with the brands to understand their objectives and then take it from there with your respective expertise. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so creative freedom is the biggest thing. I remember we talked a little bit about this on the podcast as well. So that's, by a long shot, that's probably the biggest thing. If you're structuring the content too much, then you won't allow a creator to create. At the end of the day, a lot of brands that I've in the past, not many, thank God, but a lot of brands in the past have tried to dictate your content and ultimately play it up like they know you're following better than you do. At the end of the day, I'm conversing with them on a regular basis. That's literally my job. So I know what they want. I know what they're looking for. So I think that's the biggest thing. If I was to give any advice to a brand, is give creative freedom. At the end of the day, we want to know the guidelines as well. We want to know what your objective is. So
there's still brand guidelines. All those things
100%.
kind of prevent, put guardrails in place for you, of course, but still leave it up to you to, as you said, let the creators create, right?
100%.
Very good. So give us an example of that, and Shannae, I'll ask you for one. And you were mentioning Dr. Ochre, for example, but tell us about that, because I think that's a really interesting example. That kind of opened my eyes to the possibilities of the creativity around what you do.
Yeah, so Dr. Ochre's great because they just give me the product and they're like, hey, we know you create good things, go for it. So we actually just shot a video yesterday, another one for them. And now we took an interesting spin on that one, and that'll be posted on John the Cavaliere, so you can go follow that. But yeah, so it's always interesting. They give us creative freedom, which is nice, and it's always a product that I'll go about using. I always tell people that the reason I've survived so long in this industry is because I've been pretty strategic on who I go about aligning myself with, and you were just saying that as well. So I think that's super important, and at the end of the day, the followers will, they'll notice that and they'll read right through it. So products you actually use and incorporate in your daily life, like you can see in some of the images, these are things that we would go about doing on a regular basis. So,
Shannae, that's what I really, looking through your Instagram posts, it's really a nice mix of storytelling and visual. So tell us a little bit about how you approach brands and when they approach you, retailers, and say, here's our objective. Is it a similar discussion, or how do you frame that for us?
It's a similar discussion, but it is usually a collaborative effort because they're coming to you because they think that there's a fit between the two of you. And, I always, whenever people ask me for advice on, how to work with brands, or this brand is, trying to sort of really force me to do something that I don't really feel comfortable with, I just encourage people to sort of push back because, just like Jonathan said, we know our audience very well. We engage with them on a regular basis, and it's not in anyone's best interest to do something that's too salesy or it comes across like it's sort of like a force feed. So to try to stay as natural as possible while also, following through with brand directives, I think that that's the best way to do it.
Okay. So let's talk about you representing your entire industry, your tradecraft. How do retailers best, if they want to add this to their mix, there'll probably be a mix. Most of you in the audience are either using influencers or thinking about using influencers. What's the best way to find the right person to fulfill that objective? I mean, there's Dr. Google. You go on and search and find, but there's got to be a better way. So how do you recommend the folks in the audience find the right person and the right fit? And any advice?
So hashtags are your friend. So you can use hashtags. A lot of, if you're looking for somebody local, the hashtag Canadian blogger or hashtag Toronto blogger, those are great hashtags. And that will, most bloggers in Canada, they'll use those hashtags. So you can use that and go through all of the content that's showing up on that, and you'll come across everyone sort of that's an influencer in that space. And then from there, you can sort of dig in and find people that are in your category. So if you're in the food category, you can, search like the food hashtags. Or if you are looking for people in a certain area, you can go through geotags, like location searches. Google searches also help. There are softwares that you can buy as well that will help you. I think Dovetail is one that people use, but there's several that you can look up. But hashtags are just free, it's easy, and it's a great way to come across several people. And once you've found somebody, at the top of somebody's Instagram page, there's a little arrow right beside the follow button. Yeah. And when you click on that, it shows you the similar accounts. So if you found somebody that you think is great and they're a great fit for your campaign, click on that little arrow and it will show you similar accounts. And then you can go through those accounts and you can sort of vet and search through the recommendations. And Instagram actually does a really good job at that. And sometimes just asking the influencer, like, hey, do you guys know anybody else that would be a great fit for this campaign? We know the people in the community and we can, make great recommendations as well. I feel like we don't get asked that enough, but we're always willing to offer suggestions whenever they come.
That's great advice, a great tip. Jonathan, you nodded right away when you said, click and find people who are like you. Do you consciously go out and build or find individuals like yourself to build that community of like-minded people?
Somewhat. I'm fairly fortunate that I've been around for so long that people kind of reach out. Like I've met influencers now that we used to read my site back in 2011, which is incredible.
Wow.
So I've been fairly fortunate. People have reached out through DM and through different things, and photographers want to shoot, and people want to do things. So that's pretty cool. But I completely agree with that. And I think another thing about that recommended profile search is you can also see the other accounts that Instagram sees you similar to. So for example, I know I just asked someone recently, I was like, do you mind clicking that and seeing what that looks like for me? And it was like GQ and stuff like that. So if those accounts are populating, you're kind of in the right section of Instagram, I guess, or the right niche of Instagram.
Right.
So that's another interesting insight, right? So if you're seeing accounts that have nothing to do with what you're trying to promote, then that's probably the wrong influencer for you.
That's probably a leading indicator, a good indicator. Now, do either of you work with agency side, or are you independent? Because there are agencies that go and bring together influencers. Do you work with agencies, or are you thought about working with an agency or independent?
I've thought about it, but I had a background in media already, so I was comfortable sort of doing the negotiating and stuff like that myself, but it's also a great route to go as well for brands that want sort of something a little bit more turnkey.
So I guess the agency role, they curate, saves a few steps for the retailers and the brands, right?
Yeah.
What about yourself, Jonathan? Have you thought about
I'm not represented by anyone. I've been approached multiple times over the years, and I do think for new influencers, I think it's a great option. But I'm the same way. I don't mind negotiating my own deals, and I like being a one-man band.
Comfortable being independent?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, very good. So both founders and creators, both in one package. In the time we have left, let's talk a little bit about the future, which is always a hard question. But what's the future of influencers and social media marketing? That's a very big question. It's obviously more and more a part of the marketing mix and more important, and I think I'd want to get your sense of is becoming more, it's certainly becoming more professional. You both are in the embodiment of that. But what do you see forward? How are you thinking about what happens next?
I don't think that social influencing, I guess if that's a word, is going anywhere, but I definitely think that it's good to diversify your presence and diversify where you're going. As many of us may have learned through a couple of weeks ago, Instagram was down for 14 hours and people were like losing their mind.
For 14 hours.
Well, for some people, if you're not diversified, if you don't have, like, for example, an email or a newsletter base, or if you're not on Pinterest, if you're not using YouTube, or if you don't have a podcast, things like that, I would say consider all the different ways to connect with people, online. Because there's some people who actually don't use Instagram, but I bet they check their email every day. So, having different options and considering all of those things, and also looking for influencers that also have maybe a YouTube presence, or they're big on Pinterest, or they also have a newsletter base. Staying on top of that, and the future, I just don't think it's going anywhere. I just think it's growing, and this is sort of just the direction that things are going.
So the platforms may change and
Yes.
the media may change,
Yes.
but listen, influencer marketing really has been around a long time.
It has.
And it's just today it's kind of amplified, made more professional, but it's not new that someone would in their social circle would be an influencer themselves, right? I'm sure you both grew up like that.
Yeah.
What are you guys wearing? And then you kind of influenced your friends and family. Jonathan, last thoughts. What do you see for the future for your tradecraft and retail marketing?
Yeah, I think influencer marketing will always be there, like you said. I think maybe the platform might change. I think Instagram's almost not necessarily hitting a plateau to a certain degree, but it's with the algorithm coming in and less people seeing your posts and that kind of thing. I think LinkedIn's a great option. I think it has the organic reach that Facebook did originally.
Interesting.
So I think that's a great option. I think it's a little bit more targeted, especially if you're creating content for business professionals. I think it's a great option. So the platform might change. Something might pop up tomorrow, and we're all on it. Yeah. But I definitely think influence marketing will be here for the long term, without a doubt.
Well, listen, thank you both so very much. It was a great snapshot insight. I think everyone really appreciated your forthright presentation of your tradecraft. Great representatives. So thanks again for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
We'll be right back.
Hi, it's Tony Chapman. Join me at Store 2019. I'll be delivering a keynote titled From a Place to Buy to the Place to Be, how bricks can counter clicks by focusing on selling moments versus simply peddling merchandise. I then lead into an incredible panel discussion with 3 industry titans talking about the reinvention and reimagination of Staples Canada. Joining me is David Boone, the CEO, Joe Jackman from Jackman Reinvents, and Dragon Joe Mimran, who will talk about this incredible story and leave you with actual insights and ideas for your business. Store 2019, we'll see you there.
Steve Viewers from Reshift Media here. So, great event today at the Retail Marketing Conference. Amazing speakers, amazing day. A few takeaways for me. I really loved what I heard from Paula from Wise Plum. She was talking about the fact that millennials are disappointed with what they're getting from retailers from a digital e-commerce perspective. Wasn't new information, but loved how she put it and the data she had behind it. Frederick from Golftown, he had some amazing insights in terms of how people are interacting with his brand and how they were turning that brand around. My favorite thing that he said was that the experience delivers value, and I thought that really made a lot of sense. And probably my biggest takeaway from the whole day was that Levin's Water Gin is absolutely fantastic, great Canadian company, and frankly, one of the best gins I've had ever. So.
For me, the biggest takeaway is the important and meaningful shift finally to truly valuing customers as people, as humans, versus dollar signs or even prey. And while most retailers would deny they do this and think this way, I'd argue that the strategies and actions said otherwise. Now that they're really being called to task with the customer having so many choices. We have omni-channel, globalization, all of these have impacted brands, and now brands have to demonstrate that their customers really matter and that they are actually valued. We heard Canadian Tire passes along sports tickets to customers rather than using them for executives. At Holt Renfrew, they're focused on creating spaces where people want to, and not just can, but want to stay, learn, and imagine in their stores. And finally, Neil Sweeney's session on data privacy and how even governments making an effort to value the rights of customers. And so while this is all a big shift, it will actually enable marketers to be more effective and targeted and create a more customer engagement and profitable experience.
Sasha Rečnik, Moja Financial Credit Union. So the three things I pick up from this conference were, first one, importance of data, how you need to know your customers and all the different approaches you should take to make sure you know them. The other one is the future of chat boxes and how you need to make, how the switch in convenience. It's not about convenient location anymore, it's about convenience online.
Hi, my name's Adriana Harry. I'm also with Moya Financial, and I'm piggybacking off of what Sasha mentioned. One fact I found really interesting today was that 17% of users of the Google Home and Amazon Home, Alexa, use that for financial management. I found this pretty interesting because I would think of that as more of a privacy and security issue, and that people would trust that with such a new device that tracks your data and collects all your information. I just found it an interesting topic, and I'm wondering how Moya Financial can utilize that in our own personal strategies going forward.
Up next, we're going to re-invite Michael LeBlanc, our RCC advisor, who's going to have a fireside chat with another retail veteran, and that's Trinh Tham, who is the Vice President, Brand Strategy and Planning for Sobeys. And they're really going to talk about a day in the life of building a brand. Let's see what that's all about. Welcome, Michael and Trinh.
It's a testament to Trim's commitment to this field that we talked about coming up on stage today, and you agreed without even knowing what we were going to talk about.
Yeah, I did.
So then we started talking about, okay, what exactly are we going to chat about? Because you and I have been on the stage before, we've been at this event. And, you know, the idea came up that let's talk about tradecraft. Let's talk about what you do and how you build brands, because many of you in the audience don't have the resources at their disposal that you might at Sobeys. However, there's lots of lessons to be learned just in terms of tradecraft and how to think about brand. So we thought that would be a great thing to talk about here today. So why don't we start? Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're not new, certainly, to the category. A couple of years, going on 2 years at Sobeys. But tell us about your journey and what you do for Sobeys today.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone. I've been, as you said, at Sobeys now almost 2 years. It'll be actually closer to like 18 months. And you know what our team is focused on is right in my title, right? Brand strategy and planning. And that has actually been a really great evolution over the last 18 months in terms of how our department, big M marketing, should work together. And what we really felt is that because we're a house of brands, not just one brand, that we needed somebody to kind of oversee all of the brands and connect and integrate all the great best practices and develop strategies across all the brands. So our team, is responsible by format almost to look after each one of our brands, and that includes brands like Sobeys, Safeway, Freshco, and there's a reel behind me playing, and you can see a lot of those brands are not all on there, but Foodland, Thrifty Foods out in Victoria, the list is going to go on for a little bit here. IGA in Quebec is actually run and looked after by a separate business unit, but we also have IGAs in the West as well. Farm Boy, which is up right now on screen, and we're so pleased to have the Farm Boy brand as part of the Empire Inc. portfolio.
Your latest addition, I think.
Correct.
We had Jeff York from Farm Boy here on the stage last year.
Wonderful.
So fast forward, it's a great brand. Particularly, I saw Michael LeBlanc talking about the urban strategy for a brand like that. So it really fills out the as you say, the group of brands and offerings.
That's right. And I mean, Farm Boy, it's a brand that has such great stores, and we heard lots of folks talk about experience earlier, and it's got such a great customer experience. And so we're so pleased to have them. Right now, Michael has committed to ensuring that we keep that brand actually run separately. So that's actually not part of my personal portfolio, but and that's because we want to make sure that we keep that brand whole and that we maintain that great customer experience for those who are there.
One of our earlier presenters posted some of the comments when you first purchased Farm Boy. Don't mess it up. And that's actually become a bit of a rallying cry as an organization, because Michael just stood up and said, that's our rallying cry to how we're going to run that business.
And then that's exactly it. I mean, and actually I haven't even met everybody there, the team there, and that's on purpose. I think I'm going to get a chance to meet them in the next couple of weeks, actually. But I mean, it's a nod to the importance that Sobeys places on its brands, and we can talk a little bit about that in a bit too.
Yeah. So let's talk about on a day-to-day basis. Lots of stuff to talk about today, but let's talk on a day-to-day basis. Not only do you have to oversee the house of brands and the brand strategy with the big capital B, but also keep the machine running, right? Like there's a lot that goes on. You produce how many flyers, or a team that produces these flyers. On the stage before, we've talked about that overall process, digital or print, and how it all comes together. Tell us a little bit about a day-to-day or a week-to-week process and how you think through that. And then we'll get on to kind of your approach to building brands and talking about that as well.
Great. So I always start with a year-to-year, then a quarterly, then week, then day. And I always look at things in weekly increments. I think in retail, and especially in grocery, our customers center their shop around the week. And so we like to look at it the way our customers look at it. And so if you start there, I mean, every week is different. It's not, everyone here probably would agree in your respective industries that it's never the same for us, at least not in our role, not from a strategy point of view. You can set your strategy annually, you can refine them quarterly, you can execute them weekly, but there's always stuff that comes up. And for us, it's about setting priorities. When you have so many brands, so many mouths to feed, if you will, you really do have to prioritize. And we know, we think about the bang for the buck and the effort that we put in. And so we always think about what's our return on investment. And so every week, our team gets together and we look at our overall priorities. We've set them already, obviously, for on an annual basis. But then we look at what's the customer up to this week, right? Because the customer's needs, although especially when in grocery, it's kind of relatively the same from a strategic point of view. Their needs change based on seasons, based on the time of year, and also what we have to offer them. So we make those adjustments. And also, you may set a strategy out and put a plan together, but that changes over time as well. And we have to have this, balance of a planned and then reactive, and then also being proactive to think about, okay, now what's next? So we're always thinking about, the next project, the next new idea that's going to bring some excitement to our customers.
It's interesting when you talk about that day-to-day, week-to-week planning, because you live in a world, many merchants, your merchant partners, we're going to talk about that as well, working with the merchant partners. They would set a price, and by and large, if you're a Canadian Tire, that price is pretty much going to hold for the quarter or for the half. Where you live in a world where fresh produce, we've seen, a 14% increase in fresh produce alone. Yeah. And that's just going to change eating habits. Some people are going to trade down. Some people are going to even change formats, right? They might go to FreshCo and may even change their format. So how do you deal with that? Certainly the flyer and the programs are out there, but that's a nature of your dynamic marketplace, that the pricing that you first thought when you conceived of the program isn't quite the pricing that it is today.
Right. Well, I mean, let me start by saying, we know that customers, on average, from a grocery point of view, shop 5 different banners in a month.
Yeah, Sean, your colleague Sean was talking about.
That's good that we're consistent. That's great. And so, so knowing that, we know that they trade, to your point, across our different formats, and that's why they exist, because no customer has only one need. And especially when you're talking about families. So our focus now, for the most part, for most of our banners, has shifted to looking after families, which is kind of surprising when you think about it, because you would think that a grocery store or a grocery chain has always been focused on families, but we haven't actually been until about 18 months ago, where we kind of looked at our strategy and said, okay, well, the majority of our customers and the revenue that's coming in is from the family unit.
So you were segmenting differently? You were looking at individuals prior?
So we started segmenting differently, and I won't tell you how many segments because that's trade secret,
sure.
And what they are. But you can imagine, of course, there's the high end, there's the lower end, and then there's everything in between. And we've actually embarked on developing personas for each one of those segments, and further understanding not just what they buy, how big big the segment is, the size of it, what they buy, but who are they? Who are these people? Is it, you and I may live in the same neighborhood.
Yep.
Sean and I always talk about this, right? But we are nothing alike.
The birds of a feather with the birds of a feather doesn't work together,
no,
right?
It doesn't, right?
In my neighborhood, I live with a lot of retired people, so I get a lot of funeral advice. Every week, I get funeral advice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thought-provoking anyway.
Well, I actually live in a neighborhood where a lot of, it's almost like a divide where you have a lot of younger families. I consider myself a younger family. And then you have people who are retired and ready to go into the next chapter or journey in their lives and moving out. And so, but we live next door to each other. And so if you look at postal codes, which is often very traditionally how retailers look at customer demographic, that doesn't really work anymore. So you have to get down to the level of, okay, well, who are these people, and start marketing to the people, because then you're going to find those particular personas across various segments, across various postal codes and geographies. So we do look at it that way, and I think that's becoming more important, and really understanding the customer, but then connecting it to our brand. So brand linkage has become so important to us in the last 18 months, where we've realized that, if we're spending all our effort, our resources in putting offers out to our customers, if they're not linking that back to a specific brand and understand who's making that offer to them, then it could be anybody in the market. Right. And so, we're putting a lot more effort into that now.
Well, let's step out of the Sobeys world and just talk into the tradecraft, the marketing theory world. So as you approach building brands, some, I'm sure, in this house of brands are more evolved than others. But how do you start that journey with yourself and with your team about, okay, we have this brand X, and we're going to start defining it. Whatever it existed as before is relevant, but kind of irrelevant. So tell us about how you start that journey.
Well, I mean, I would say over the years, because not the first retailer I've been at, I've tried to really bring a consistent approach as to how we build brand strategies overall. So it doesn't matter if you're in grocery or in retail, or if you're in entertainment or in media or QSR. I think I look at a brand like a person, right? And I always look at, first, how do you define that person? How would you describe that person? And usually when you start to describe people, you get down to their values and what they stand for. So you obviously have, you and I, all of us here have things that we believe in, our beliefs. And we start with that, and that becomes your foundation. So all that to say, you have to start with, what is the foundation of your brand? And then when you look at, what do I stand for as a person? What do I believe in the most strongly as a person, as a brand? You build from there. Then, of course, you've got to look at your customer, who are your different segments. We already covered a little bit about that. You have to look at, within your customer segments, oftentimes it doesn't matter if you're at Sobeys or other places, but you look at your demand space or your market size. Yep. And then you start to carve out who are the most important customers. And then from there, you now have your foundation of your brand. You understand who your customers are. You understand who your most important customers are. And then you start to define and describe that brand as if it were a person even further, right? So, if you look at your life goal, what's your goal in life? What's my brand's goal in life? I have my own goals. Our brands all have an ambition. And so we try to really make sure that we define that. And, marketers are, famous for coming up with all sorts of terminology. I've generally kind of stuck to the same ones because, and everywhere I've been, they're like, do you mean ambition or objective? Or I'm like, just call it ambition. So, and then from there, I typically use the house model, but you can use a house, you can use a condo, you can use whatever model you want. You start to really define the offer. So what are the key offers that you are offering your customers, and those become your pillars. So I think about it as a house. I think about the structure, and I think about structurally what's the value proposition of your brand. So what do I bring as a person to the table every time I show up? And then those things are the things that you become known for, the things that you become famous for. And every time you show up, every time your brand shows up in media, in digital, in flyer, wherever it is, you know what to expect. And there has to be this level of consistency that then, as a marketer, you can't deliver on your own, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more later on about how you bring that to life. And then ultimately, it's about a promise. What do I promise? What do I promise you I'm going to bring, right? And that type of structure, and I'm just using what my version of that is. The point I was trying to make is that I think all of us here, if we're trying to bring a brand strategy to life, need to take a look at what's that structure for you, and then start to map out your strategy against that structure.
So you got your brand's foundation. You've got the pillars on which, whether they're beliefs or whatever you want to call them, but you've got pillars on top of which. And then, so you've now got a definition of who and what this brand is. You've got a personality, as you would say. And now you're trying to look at everything you do within the lens of that personality, right down to the tactical elements of print or digital or whatever you're doing. Is that a fair way? And then how do you, I guess kind of a good transition to the next question is, how do you translate that within even your own marketing team as you come up with that, okay, here's how to translate and understand this brand's personality?
Yeah. Well, before I get into how you translate, maybe I'll touch on the personality piece, because I always use the family analogy, and Sobeys, we're all about family, and I know we're going to talk just more in general, but I always use the family analogy. And if you use that and you start with that, you think, okay, well, is this brand part of a family, because we are a family of brands, or is it just a single person? And oftentimes I think about, most of the organizations I've been at, it's been a family of brands or a house of brands. And I think about, okay, is this a sibling or a cousin or an identical twin? And what clothes are they wearing?
Or an orphan, right?
Or a total orphan, which usually that doesn't go very well most of the time for that brand, in the sense of, if it's an orphan, then usually there's something that's off strategy, right? Because you want to bring that orphan into the family.
Let's talk about that for a second. So I've worked on brands, and I can think of Black & Decker and DeWalt tools, and Levi's and Dockers. Both brands I've worked with. And in both cases, we didn't really want the users to know about the other users, or we wanted them to go in one direction. So we did not want the DeWalt hardcore contractor to know that we were made by Black & Decker, because they saw that as a consumer tool.
Right.
So it casted shade, as the kids would say, on the DeWalt brand. And similarly, when we were at Levi's, Dockers was a huge business, but we didn't, that was my dad's pants. So we really didn't want to connect those two brands. Yeah. So they were distinct. When I look at your house of brands, from Freshco to Sobeys to Farm Boy, how do you manage that? And again, we're not talking specifically about your brands, but the notion that some brands need to be apart from other brands. Talk about that for a little bit.
Well, I think that all comes down to how you go to market, right? And if you've defined your brands clearly enough, they shouldn't overlap, because they're different. And if they do overlap, then it begs the question, what's your portfolio strategy? And should some of these brands combine into one, or
or go away,
or go away, to be quite honest. And so your Black & Decker and DeWalt example, those were two distinct brands targeting two distinct customers with two distinct strategies and personalities. So I think that's okay, and we do that a lot. I don't want Freshco looking anything like Sobeys, right? Because otherwise, then they'd be twins. Yeah. And so that's on purpose. And then you were asking me about how do you bring that to life, and I do think that not to get too much on the soft side of marketing, but I always hate to underestimate the value of the visual piece. I think the visual representation of a brand is the first impression of your brand, and then it's your last impression. And so I think how you show up visually should be dictated by your brand strategy, and should be very consistent. And then all the ways to activate, whether it is a product offer or a service offer or a loyalty program or any channel, like a flyer that you receive, should come from the same consistent voice with the same consistent brand pillars.
So that same emotional embodiment that's kind of visualized in one way or the other. And again, just to bring it back to a fun example, when I walk into my local Farm Boy, there's Mikey, which is the monkey that's swinging over the fresh fruit. I asked Jeff, what's up with it? What's like a bit of a mascot? It's a bit of us about the brand, and it's actually the way it's positioned with fruit being right in the first thing you see in the store. It's really kind of an embodiment of the brand. And we could see others in other categories, right? So that way to bring emotional connection right into the physicalness of
That's right.
what you're looking at.
However, that swinging monkey might be perceived as an extra spend at a store like Freshco, where a customer may think, well, why did you go to the extra expense to put a swinging monkey over my bananas? Just give me the bananas.
Just give me a better price on the bananas,
That's right.
So let's talk about, as you develop this craft and as you develop these brands, how do you bring, you're on a bus, you've created, you use a metaphor, you've built the bus, you're taking the bus down the road, you've built a brand, a definition. How do you make sure by the time you get to the destination, whatever that is, that everybody's still on the bus with you, particularly on your team, and then we'll kind of start talking about the rest of the organization.
Yeah. Well, I think it starts with leadership. And I think it starts with ensuring that you are surrounded by great leadership, that you are selling your ideas through right to the top. And then it's ensuring that, I think, before you even get into the brand piece, it's just about working as a partner with your peers and with your team, and it's treating people with respect, and it's making, I often always say to the team, like, sometimes it's actually better when you bring an idea to the table and someone else goes, I have a really great idea. And even if it was the idea you had in mind, it's okay that it was their idea, because it doesn't really matter whose idea it is, as long as you're all marching in the same direction. So for me, a big part of it is how you approach it with business partners. And I always think of marketing's role as, first and foremost, obviously being the voice of the customer, but second, being a partner at the table, like a strategic partner at the table, where they invite you, and your business partners, whether it's in merchandising or operations or just general management, are inviting the marketing team to the table to discuss business challenges, bring, problem solve, come up with new ideas and strategies. And so I think that is so important. That's integral to bringing your brand to life. Because if you don't have that, then how do you get people rallied around your brand? And then being always the advocate for ensuring that, when we come up with ideas or, we're in a joint business planning session. I was just in Halifax with one of our pharmacy team yesterday. And we had a really great session, and it was all about letting people share their ideas, but at least giving people something to react to, like a point of view from a strategy point of view. Right. So for me, I think that's first and foremost. And in grocery, being best buddies with your merchants is critical for us.
Well, that's a great segue to the next question. Was as retail marketers, in some ways, we're always outnumbered a little bit by the merchants, who are always in some ways. But the merchants are such a critical part because they're really going out and finding great product, finding great values in their lens and their category, and really are the embodiment, if we talk about the real hands-on. So they're out buying product, setting price. So how do you, as a retail marketer, you mentioned at the table, how do you get a seat at the table with the merchants? Because your success is going to largely, if not singularly, but largely be driven by being able to work with the merchants, being considered it's a great compliment to be called a great operator by our friends in merchandising. Yes. How do you approach working with the merchants as a group?
Yeah, well, I think like anything in life, you've got to assess the person across the table from you, and I think as an organization, it's the same. It's no different, right? So I think you have to assess the maturity of that organization with respect to its understanding of marketing and the importance it places on marketing. Because I think you want to start with what's their perspective first, right? Do they value marketing? Are they skeptical? Are they excited to have you at the table? And I think I always start there. And then once I assess, okay, are they open? Do they want me here, or they're not sure if they want me here?
Because you arrive with a predecessor, and they may or may not have had
a good or bad experience.
Right.
And so I think that's always important to understand where the merchants are coming from. And to your point, because especially in a retail organization, yes, merchants outnumber marketing, quite a bit. And so you can't assume that everyone has the same background either. So I always try to understand individually and as a culture, where does marketing fit? And then from there, it's just really honestly, marketers should understand their numbers. We should all understand the business that we're working on. And the way most of my career, my portfolios have been structured has been by format and by brand. And so you have to understand, the contribution that brand brings to the table from a financial point of view, because that also sets expectations as to what the merchants want or need from you.
When I was at the shopping channel, you had such a wide variety. So you had electronics, which had big margins, but
That's right.
or sort of big top line, but very low margins.
Yeah.
But then you had the health and beauty folks, and they really ran the roost, right? Because the margins and beauty. So you kind of start to align yourself to, which of these groups is really the most important and what are the key drivers to the business. Let's take it one level. You just mentioned you were in Halifax, I think. Let's talk about how do you translate a brand into the operations, into the operators? Because really, there's no cash registers in the head office. There's no customers in the head office.
That's
it's really
right.
all happening in your respective stores. So what are your top kind of tips and ways to communicate with the store managers, who really are your customers in many ways, as well as the end user?
Well, again, it's about, so if it's store managers or if it's your peers in the business, you have to think about their perspective. So what is their job, their role, their main function? If you're talking about stores, it's about serving our customers. So the way we approach brand is a few things. We talk about the aspects of the brand that touch the customers and how to bring that to life as they're speaking to their customers, as they're serving their customers, and how it shows up in store visually. So we usually tend to focus on those elements of the brand. We don't get into, the market size and the demand space and all that stuff. So, we try to speak their language. And usually show up with proof of concept. So we always do, and that's not a new term, obviously, to anyone in this room, but proof of concept is so important, having a point of view and showing what has already worked. So oftentimes doing some tests and then showing them what works usually gets their buy-in a lot quicker than if you just show up and say, I have a really great idea that nobody has heard of.
The worst, a store manager told me, the worst thing to ever hear is, hi, I'm from head office, I'm here to help. It was like, oh my God, get out of my store.
Yeah.
So let's flip that a little bit. How have you found the best ways to take feedback from, the store managers? They're in their community. They know their community better than you're ever going to know your community. You know this brand architecture and structure, whatever the kind of retail you're in, but they're really there operating and knowing the customer. We had someone else say, I think it was on the loyalty panel, you don't need to tell me who my customers are. I see them every day. Yeah. You could inform me better, but talk about how you kind of take that feedback in from so many points of presence as a retail marketer.
Well, just to clarify, you would never show up at a store and start, telling a store manager or a store associate what you think first. You always ask, how's your store? How are your sales? How are your customers? And that you start there, and you start there, oftentimes in other areas of the business as well. And really getting close to what the experiences that the store manager is having with the customers. And being open to the feedback and listening to what's actually going on. Like, you can't get defensive, ever. Right? Because we might think that we came up with the best program, with the best signage package, and the best integrated marketing plan. And then the store manager was like, well, the worst thing you can hear as a marketer is, that was the most difficult thing to execute. And we didn't understand what you were trying to get us to do. That is the worst feedback.
Because the one thing I've learned about operators in my career, they're really there to help. They are. They're really there they see their role in multiple ways, but the great operators see their role as, I'm here to help and execute these programs. But if they can't make heads or tails of it, then you run into a bit of challenge. So
there's always, as part of our IMC, or integrated marketing communications plans, we always include the internal component. And internal, doesn't matter if it's Sobeys or anywhere I've been, internal means your employees and, most importantly, your store associates. So we always make sure that we get them excited first, and then you can go to market. Then you go to in town.
Sure. Once you got them on board, you're all set.
That's right.
In the time we got left, about a minute left. Top couple of 1 or 2 or 3 tips to retail marketers in the audience about how to approach building a brand within an organization. You've talked about how to get started, but give us a sense of over a cup of coffee. What would you advise? So
I would say one thing which we all I think has been a theme of the day, and I talked about already, is to understand your customer and always be that voice of your customer. So always ask, what is the customer going to take away from what we're trying to put together as a project or a program or a campaign? What is that customer going to take away? And if we can't explain it to ourselves, then there's no way a customer is going to get it. 2 is be the advocate for your brand. Right? So if you're the voice of the customer, you also have to be the advocate for your brand and make sure that your brand gets a voice at the table as well. And not, when I say brand, I mean the work that you've done on the strategy to make sure that you are always challenging your merchants, your operators, that when they come up with an idea, that they are mapping back to the strategy as well. And the third one is just, honestly, be authentic. Just be authentic and just build those relationships, and I think you're off.
Well, listen, I couldn't imagine a better conversation. Thank you again so much for being open to the opportunity, and kind of we arrived at this point. I hope it was useful for everyone. I know I learned. I can never stop learning. So thank you so much for joining me, and thanks again. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Michael.
Paul Allenby. Levenswater Water Gin is, the name Levenswater means water of life in Dutch. I started making this gin about 5.5 years ago. My great-grandmother was Dutch, so that was my inspiration. We make it in Niagara. It has 34 botanicals, and the whole design of the gin is really set in the fact that Toronto is the most diverse city in the world. So I wanted to make a gin that was diverse. 34 botanicals from 19 different countries. Everything's natural, the color's natural, the flavor's natural, and the aromatics are natural.
So at the end of a great day of retail marketing, thought leadership, and networking with friends and colleagues alike, we're all treated to amazing cocktails sponsored by Emilio at Admill, featuring retail marketing agency veteran Paul Allenby's latest venture, a bespoke local-made gin called Levenswater, as you just heard. We're going to get Paul onto an upcoming episode of TVOR to tell us his amazing story of moving from leading top retail marketing agencies to following his passion and creating an award-winning spirit. In the last few minutes of the podcast, I thought I'd take a few minutes and just summarize some of the top notes or themes. I won't go through all of the different sessions. They were all amazing, and at the risk of leaving some out, broad themes that I picked up on. You continue to hear this distinction without a difference when people talk about different channels, store channel or bricks and mortar or online channel. You really start to see these all melding together. You can really start to see the retailers working hard not to own what Steve Dennis calls the boring middle. You really saw that in a number of presentations. From the top, leading from our purpose from Lauren McDonald, CMO of IKEA, very personal journey about both the ethos of IKEA and then how it gets represented into the marketplace and into their campaigns. Paula Courtney chatted with Richard Hill, Peter Van Stock, who will be on the next edition of The Voice of Retail, talking about how Peter builds everything around sustainability in his SPUD, great journey, so we'll hear more about that. Rochelle Ezekiel talking about, from Holtz, Senior Vice President of Customer Experience, just talking about elements of what they do from an experience perspective in their brand, and really, as you see it, as Doug Stevens often talks about, exchanging, not about selling things, and Tony Chapman talks about this as well, but selling experiences and how they're working in their new stores. Frederick Lecoq from CMO from Golf Town and Sporting Life, he talked about building a marketing stack. That was probably one of the most interesting for me from a tech perspective, because he really lays out how confusing it can be, but where to get started in terms of building a marketing tech stack. That was an asked, or one of those sessions that was requested from Retail Council of Canada and just from retailers I talked to each and every day. I talked about Lisa Owen. She did great, the pivot of her business. You can listen to a prior Voice of Retail podcast episode with her co-founder, Christy Weber, talks all about that particular pivot in their business, moving to a more sustainable model in the rental space. What else? We had Corby Fine, a former colleague of mine from Rogers Media, now Vice President of Simply Financial, talking about the use of data and the use of analytics to do state-of-the-art marketing, whether it's acquisition or retention or growth. So that was very interesting for me to listen to Corby. It's been a long time since I've had the pleasure of chatting with him, so it was great to hear. Loyalty panel was another highlight for me, of the many. My former boss, Rob Shields, co-founder and CEO of PayMe. Rob and I worked together at Hudson's Bay. And I sat down with Sean Bloom, who was a colleague of mine at Hudson's Bay as well, who's now Vice President CRM and Loyalty at Sobeys, and Sean Stewart, Vice President Loyalty at Canadian Tire. Such an interesting space. Rachel McQueen was on there from Air Miles as well. Such an interesting space in Canada, the loyalty space. So much evolution happening, and two certainly of Canada's leading thought leaders, 3-4 of Canada's leading thought leaders in that space. What else we had? Jeremy Miller wrapped us up with a great brand strategist, really a great closing keynote, great way to bring it home. He talked about the Fossilberry flop of all things, and how that was around before it was introduced in the Olympics. People saw it happening in the various circuits and the lead up to it, but no one really grabbed that innovation and ran with it until it happened, and it really changed the world. And it was a very interesting way to talk about innovation. So that's a wrap on this very special edition of The Voice of Retail. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of M.E. LeBlanc Company, Inc. And you can learn more about me at meleblanc.co or on LinkedIn. And stay tuned for our next regular edition of the podcast, available each and every Friday, available on iTunes or wherever you love listening to podcasts. Until then, have a great week.